Hello everyone, welcome back. So, Xilonen's been out for a while, and it's odd to me that for whatever reason, nobody knows how the arguably strongest support in the game buffs the arguably strongest DPS in the game. So I'm here to bridge that gap and fill that hole so we can all finally understand how Xilonen is in fact one of Neuvillette's strongest allies. But first, don't forget to subscribe. This is going to be absolute pure degeneracy, but it is also video number 6 in a still ongoing series of videos about various teams and interactions that we can still have with Xilonen that make her just such an incredible character to have. So don't forget to subscribe for more of those videos and ring that bell so you're notified of the latest videos, because hitting that subscribe button always makes YouTubers feel better about themselves in the morning. Alright, without further ado, let's get into some Neuvillette gameplay. We'll start off with the Neuvillette team that I actually, and I'm no longer joking here, I actually think this team doesn't actually get talked about all that much, which is of course Forward Vape Neuvillette. And Forward Vape Neuvillette is an interesting one because there's always been two scenarios where we would find ourselves with Neuvillette. First rotation, and then second rotation. I've talked about this in the past, but second rotation memes are often a problem for characters like Nehida, or I guess just Dendro characters in general when you're trying to do things like forward vaping, and so that's something we're going to have to look into. But if things go well and we're in what I would call the first rotation stage of the team, well, oh yeah, we do a lot of damage, and I will of course show that in a second. But when we find ourselves in the second rotation memes, it is kind of incredible how much damage Neuvillette still does, even though there is a pretty devastating damage loss right there. The problem, as always, comes from the overwhelming Dendro aura, because the reality is you're simply not going to get any chance at all when you have that underlying Dendro aura to have an underlying Hydro aura to crystallize if you have that ongoing Dendro application. So this is the case if you're playing with Nehida or Emily, or I guess any other just general Dendro character that has that kind of off-field Dendro application. I guess if your Dendro application is as slow as C4 Kirara, then you're fine, but then you're not really going to be doing a whole lot of forward vapes, so there's that problem right there. So I think at that point, when we reach that kind of second rotation meme, it's probably best that we take a step back, breathe, and then just choose to buff our pyro damage with Xilonen instead. You're not going to get as much of a damage increase, obviously, compared to buffing in Neuvillette, but it's either buff your pyro damage at that point or buff nothing, because you can't buff Dendro damage with someone like Xilonen. We're here with Neuvillette and Snorlax because it seems like Snorlax is really the only boss that can actually tank the hits enough for me to make a point I'm trying to make. So we're going to do first rotation Neuvillette. And we get the Temple of Wisdom out, we get our Pyro app out. You see that? That 138k charge attack tick right there? That is what happens if we are able to do first rotation things. And in this case, we were able to actually continue to do first rotation things, which is nice. So there's that 138k right there. Somehow I was able to actually overwhelm Nehida's Dendro aura. I don't know how that happened, but either way, that worked out a lot better than before. Of course, like I mentioned though, second rotation memes usually is pretty prevalent, so let's have a look at what kind of damage output we're doing with second rotation memes. Like I mentioned, we might as well buff the pyro damage at this point. We have our 2 Draconic stacks, 90k on the big vape hit. Also keep in mind we're doing about 30k on the unvaped hits as opposed to previously the 41k unvaped hits, which is also part of the calculus right there. But yeah, we end up with, as you can see, a pretty noticeable damage decrease as a direct result of having those second rotation memes. And the problem therein lies in the fact that we're actually getting double dipped on second rotation memes, because not only are we losing a specific draconic stack, i.e. the last one, because we can't crystallize any Hydro when you have an overwhelming Dendro aura, but we were also lacking a distinct bit of the scroll buff as well on Xilonen. That's going to be something that we're losing out on. Thus, that is why we're going down from like 138,000 damage on one of those ticks from the first rotation demonstration, all the way down to 90-something K ticks instead. I also had a look at whether second rotation memes end up making Xilonen-based forward Vape Neuvillette teams actually end up doing worse, at least from Neuvillette's perspective, compared to, let's say, C4 Layla-based forward Vape Neuvillette teams, which is, of course, like an older forward Vape Neuvillette team that I have been championing a while ago. Basically, the idea is running a cryo offhitter like Layla, especially with the C4 buff, kind of ensures that you get all 3 draconic stacks. And that's kind of huge because, like I mentioned, you're not going to be able to get that final draconic stack if you are finding yourselves in second rotation memes, right? Now, the numbers that I saw were a little bit all over the place, and it's partly because of Layla's C4 and the fact that it's like really finicky. But I did see 97.5k ticks just spread out all over the place, and that would probably be the absolute cream of the crop type forward vape. The super duper lucky forward vape under the Temple of Wisdom that happened to come right after a star from Layla's shield hit a target. So normal other ticks that seem to be coming from stars were hitting at best for 33k, so that's kind of what we're looking at. That being said though, like when you look at that, the math ain't mathin'. So I'm not really entirely sure what's going on there. It's probably just really chaotic that I may have missed a number here or there. But the main takeaway is that obviously first rotation style Xilonen teams are absurd, but even the second rotation meme Xilonen teams seem to be doing about as good as previous versions of this team, i.e. let's say with something like C4 Layla. Also keep in mind that Mavuika is on the horizon, and once again I don't know what she's going to do yet. If she ends up having faster pyro up, like let's say Shangling speed, without the need of 3000 ER requirements like Shangling does in a team where she's the only pyro character, perhaps things are going to be even more degenerate for the forward Vape Neuvillette players out there. We'll just have to see, right? Obviously forward Vape Morlani players will be able to take full advantage of that as well, so that's to be expected. But until 5.2 rolls around, and then we start getting Mavuika leaks, assuming she shows up in 5.3, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Alright, it's time. Let's have a look at the Neuvillette team. I probably don't need to tell you that the Neuvillette team goes uber hard. So instead, what I want to do actually is briefly look at the difference between running Zhongli, which is like the sort of old school the Neuvillette team, versus running Xilonen, which is of course the Neuvillette team. Just like our last video, being the Chevy video, here's something I prepared earlier.
One with wind and cloud, all the news join my knights.
So what we're seeing is an increase from around the 50 to 51k mark on my build with Zhongli to the 59k mark with Xilonen. Of course, let's just remember that this is the UDEX we're talking about, so it's every tick hitting around that mark. So the damage increase is actually very significant. Oh, I'll just mention as well, Petra Zhongli versus Peak Patrol Scroll Xilonen, just so you have that context. I do want to also briefly discuss the idea of whether it'd be more effective to get C1 Neuvillette as opposed to getting Xilonen for the purpose of further investing in your Neuvillette, because I think the Spreadsheet Impact players have considered C1 to be a bigger upgrade over Xilonen, and I actually kind of agree. Okay, so as you can see, if you go up against Snorlax and a few other enemies that can provide you with, let's say, Pyro app on yourself, you can then use that to infuse with Kazuha's ult, which of course then can be reacted with Hydro to give you the third Draconic stack, and that is how I'm going to pretend I have C1, because then I actually have the third Draconic stack in the Neuvillette team, which otherwise I would not be able to do. Under these conditions, and by the way, we're not forward vaping with a Pyro-infused Kaz ult, that's just not going to happen, it does seem like Neuvillette is doing a bit more damage. The 61k ticks as opposed to the previously mentioned 59k ticks while still running Petra Zhongli. You also get interruption resistance, which is great. Of course, it's meaningless in this team because it's Zhongli, but still, you also get interruption resistance as part of his C1, which can always be really, really useful. For those curious, this should be what I would see if I were to get C1 Neuvillette. True, utter degeneracy right there. Look, if I really want to get those big numbers, I guess I could go for C1. But the reality is Neuvillette's next banner would have to have all of the 4 stars that I don't have at C6 yet for me to even consider getting C1 Neuvillette, because I have no intention whatsoever. All that being said, I don't think it's going to be much of a controversial point for me to say it's still better to grab Xilonen instead of C1 Neuvillette. Because the reality is, Xilonen benefits so many other characters, whereas Neuvillette's constellations, they generally just benefit him, which is fine because he's a really, really powerful hyper carry. So getting his constellations to benefit him is actually quite a lot of value. But if you're like me and you actually value, I guess, interesting things and having fun over just killing things faster, then I think in the grand scheme of things, this is going to be a more important consideration.
How dare you, string up!
Settle down.
So that's where we're at with Neuvillette. It's funny and fascinating to me that this character first showed up in the game pretty damn strong, right? But then with the release of Farina, he became the strongest DPS in the game pretty much. This is the general consensus in the community that I also tend to agree. And then Hoyo saw fit to release another ridiculously powerful support that outstandingly increases his overall power as well. We'll see if Mavoika shows up and ends up doing something absolutely ridiculous for him as well, but I think until then, let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about the absolute state, I guess, of Neuvillette these days? And the fact that Xilonen is yet another character that just makes him an absolute monster? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed the latest video. Hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact. Actually, I'll do it next time. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
The tides beckon. Bow your head.
Let the mountain's veins boil! Time to shine!
Fallen leaves, adorn my night! The wind knows me. Be sanctified.
Pardon me.
wind.
Let my name echo in song!
Well timed. The birds talk.
Letting brave names echo!
Silence!
In the end.